Former President Trump attacking the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley, over new reports that Milley feared Trump would attempt a coup after the election. Trump denied the reports. He said, if I was going to do a coup, one of the last people I would want to do it with is General Mark Milley. Well, joining me now is former National Security Advisor to then President Trump, John Bolton. He's the author of the book, The Room Where It Happened. And Ambassador, I should note for our viewers who couldn't see you because you were off screen, you were chuckling as you saw Trump's response. Tell me why.
Well, it's juvenile, and it's unbecoming of a former president of the United States to refer to people who served the country well and served in his administration as if they're in a kindergarten class. And it's a sad commentary on Trump himself, but I think also reflective of much of his behavior during 4 years in office. And I'm laughing, and I shouldn't laugh because it's more serious than that, but it's so typical that I can't stop myself.
And I want to ask you, because as we see these revelations about Milley in a slew of books about the Trump years, I do want to note for our viewers, you were kind of long gone from the White House by the time some of these periods had happened, right? Leading up this summer into the election and so on. But Milley thought that it was feasible that Trump would attempt a violent coup if he had thought it realistically possible. Do you agree with him?
Well, I think Trump was capable of doing almost anything. And I would just say, although I was gone from the White House, I was still under attack by Trump, who had a civil lawsuit against me and tried to launch a grand jury as well. I think I have the highest respect for Mark Milley. I think he's the right person for the job as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I thought that when I was still in the government. And I think he was doing his best, number one, to uphold the Constitution. And this is where his loyalty, and I think the loyalty of all the chiefs, was something Trump fundamentally didn't understand. He had one concept of loyalty, which is loyalty to Donald Trump. And there is an element of personal loyalty for any senior advisor to the president. But ultimately, your loyalty is to the Constitution. And Milley understood that without qualification. And number two, it's a triumph of the success of our concept of civilian control over the military, that Milley knew that the military itself would be in danger if it got sucked into American politics. And with somebody like Donald Trump, for whom everything is politics, it's very, very difficult. He and Mark Esper, the Secretary of Defense, had a very difficult course to walk. And I think the fact we got through this successfully is a credit to both of them for the thinking they did and the support they had from their colleagues.
So it sounds like you trust his assessment, saying that you think Trump was really capable of anything. Is that fair?
Yeah,
I want to ask you, because in November of 2020, you told my colleague Jake Tapper about he asked you about the possibility of Trump staging a violent coup. This was just in, a couple weeks after the election. The big lie was really taking hold. And you said it gives Trump too much credit. Do you look differently on that now?
No, the idea of Trump staging a coup does give him too much credit. That requires advanced thinking, planning, strategizing, building up support. And I just don't think he's capable of that. What he was capable of was, on a daily basis, doing something more and more outrageous than he had done the day before, all to the same end of staying in power. But the notion that Trump could have orchestrated a coup does give him too much credit. And the fact is that the efforts that he did make got more and more extreme, more and more outrageous, and various institutions and individuals were able to come together and keep the Constitution moving.
Did you ever hear Trump talk about Nazis or Hitler?
Well, he had little or no sense of history. And because his father was German, he from time to time talked about Germans, not usually in a very complimentary way, and certainly not in a complimentary fashion about Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, who was just here in Washington. I think Trump doesn't think in philosophical or even policy terms. That gives him too much credit, too. So many things he said about history were based on no knowledge whatever. And after a while, I just didn't take them seriously.
Do you consider Trump a fascist? Because Milley clearly does.
Yeah, I think that requires believing Trump can think in a consistent philosophical framework for more than about 10 or 15 seconds, and it's just not possible. He is all about Donald Trump, and he is all about Donald Trump staying in office, which is why he is still at it attacking the election, coming up with ridiculous theories that Mike Pence somehow didn't do what he should have done, that he's going to be returned to office because states are going to reverse their electoral college votes. These are conclusions that you could draw only if you were Donald Trump.
You have been saying for months that Trump's political base is shrinking, that you are looking at data that is telling you that. And so I wonder what you think, because Republicans, they clearly do not think that. I think it's fair to say a lot of these congressional Republicans probably have a pretty good pulse of their constituencies and where they are politically and ideologically and whether they support Trump or not. And I wonder how you square what you were saying, a shrinking Trump base, with Kevin McCarthy going again to see Trump, this time to Bedminster, to kiss the ring.
Because I think there's a disjunction between real people, which is what both a national poll and a poll of New Hampshire that I've taken shows, that Trump's base is shrinking. I think in the Washington bubble, in the media, if I may say so, and in some elected Republicans, some state parties, they're still absorbed with Trump. But I've got another poll.
Some, I mean, it seems like a majority.
Well, I think actually I've got a poll coming out Monday. I don't want to step on my own news, but I think it shows people are moving away from Trump, continue to move away from Trump, that many of his actions, including his criticism of Mike Pence and what he did on January the 6th, are reducing his support among Republicans. I think we need more Republicans to step up and say so.
House Republicans are building essentially a midterm strategy around Trump being the leader of the party. They are not... They're not believing anything of the ilk that you are describing right now.
Well, I think they are part of the Washington bubble, but I think if they look at their own constituencies, they will find, obviously it varies from district to district, but I do think Republicans, as you would expect, are looking ahead, not in the rearview mirror of Donald Trump, who is obsessed with whether or not the 2020 election was stolen. Real people have real problems, not least of which may be rising inflation in our country, and they want people who are going to address those solutions. If Republicans work on policy, that's always been the path to success, has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
I want to have you back on in the future to talk about that for sure. We'll see if you were right on that.
Well, stay tuned to the poll on Monday.
In one of these books, Trump is reported to have told advisors that he hoped you would die of COVID.
You know,
what is your response to learning that?
It's very typical of Trump. He has an obsession with himself, and you're either for him or against him. And I would remind those who are kissing his ring now, you know, Mike Pence, who had the hardest job in Washington for 4 years as vice president. Constitutionally, we used to say he was the only person at the White House who couldn't resign. He had to stay loyal. That was his obligation, and he did, right up until January the 6th. And it's never been the same between Pence and Trump. So everybody who thinks you can kiss his ring on a daily basis and you'll be fine, just wait till the one time you don't. It's a very dangerous path to follow.
You were asked to testify in the first impeachment trial, and you didn't. And I wonder if, especially as we've heard so much lately from former Trump administration officials who clearly thought things privately at the time, but didn't speak out at the time. And you had the chance to speak out later. Do you regret not doing that?
Well, it's a complicated answer, but I will put it this way. I think the effort to impeach Trump over Ukraine, which is where I could have testified, was conducted in a way that achieved the exact opposite of the objective that Nancy Pelosi and the advocates of impeachment wanted. And it was foreseeable that it was going to be that way. They wanted to punish or diminish, at a minimum, restrain and deter Donald Trump. And in fact, their effort in impeachment, because it was so badly flawed, emboldened him, made him convinced that he could do a number of things and escape the consequences. And I think that whole effort was a mistake. The way they conducted it was a mistake. And when Nancy Pelosi or others say, hey, I've got a great idea of how to stop Donald Trump, let's jump off the cliff together, no, I don't feel any obligation to follow them off.
Let's put Nancy Pelosi aside.
And the advocates of impeachment generally.
You are John Bolton, right? You can do what you want to do, speak for yourself, disavow whatever political path you see them on. Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you speak for you?
Yeah. Well,
for the country?
Because during that period, among other things, I was being held captive, in effect, in a pre-publication review process of my book. And as I think the facts show, we asked the White House to expedite clearance of what could have been the testimony on Ukraine, and they wouldn't do it.
So, I mean, I have no doubt that it would have been at considerable sacrifice yourself to do it, or potential legal peril. You still could have done it.
No, and it wouldn't have made any difference. I did say finally to the Senate, look, if
we'll never know, though, will we?
Because the White House argument that even if whatever I had said turned out to be true, it didn't amount to an impeachable offense, that argument had already prevailed. The flaw was in the initial investigation to focus it so narrowly on Ukraine. Why? Because they wanted it over with so it didn't influence the Democratic presidential nomination contest. That was the key strategic mistake that they made, and the outcome was predictable.